For our customers, though, the benefits that they receive really is the maintenance of uptime. Having that early indication that there are signs of degradation, so that with enough detail that a maintenance team can go and start to repair and fix what is going wrong. But they also benefit from precise and correct maintenance. So for the other 95% of their assets, machines, their operations that are in perfectly good order, that you have a centralized visibility of this. It also helps and does touch on sustainability or has an impact on sustainability, because there is less time spent idling, less consumables used while performing maintenance, less emergency transportation of spares. So really, predictive maintenance in an industry like food and beverage, where it's high volumes, you can sell as much as you can produce.
Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm James and I'll be your host for today's webinar on predictive maintenance in the food and beverage industry. Well, thank you for joining us. We're really excited about today's session because predictive maintenance is fast becoming a competitive advantage for manufacturers, especially in an industry as fast moving as F&B. So today we'll take a closer look at what predictive maintenance is and how it differs from traditional monitoring. We'll look into how leading manufacturers around the world are already seeing real value in predictive maintenance. And of course, we'll see how this is being applied within the Middle East market. Now, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function that we have, and we will ask our speakers your questions at the end of the session. Now, talking about our experts, I'd like to introduce you to Jonathan. He is the head of solution engineering for Senseye Predictive Maintenance. And we also have Rakesh, our other expert, who is the digital enterprise services portfolio manager here in the Middle East. Thank you both for your time today. Looking forward towards our discussions. And perhaps maybe to kick off, Jonathan, if I could come to you and ask, maybe you could just give a quick introduction onto predictive maintenance, especially in regards to the F&B market.
Absolutely, and good afternoon to everyone online. So, predictive maintenance. Essentially, it's an evolution from traditional condition monitoring. But instead of having a specialist go around a facility, taking manual measurements, then uploading them to the computer, analyzing it and reporting back on it, I think you could think of that process like a vibration analyst going around and doing a manual process. This is now automated. So the process of data collection, analysis, and reporting is automated using technology. Technology and systems and solutions like Senseye within Siemens. But like any good reliability engineer, the system continues to learn. It learns about failure modes, failure patterns, and starts to become very specific when it sees signs of degradation. But it's also not limited to rotating equipment and doesn't just use one form or one stream of data like vibration. It incorporates a wide range of data sources and data types to get a complete view of an asset's condition, signs of degradation, and really start to highlight those important details when needed. For our customers, though, the benefits that they receive really is the maintenance of uptime. Having that early indication that there are signs of degradation, so that with enough detail that a maintenance team can go and start to repair and fix what is going wrong. But they also benefit from precise and correct maintenance. So for the other 95% of their assets, machines, their operations that are in perfectly good order, that you have a centralized visibility of this. It also helps and does touch on sustainability or has an impact on sustainability, because there is less time spent idling, less consumables used while performing maintenance, less emergency transportation of spares. So really, predictive maintenance in an industry like food and beverage, where it's high volumes, you can sell as much as you can produce, that having the ability to have a really good maintenance strategy in place, backed by a centralized visibility, it means that you can produce more and essentially make more.
Right. Thank you for that overview there. Maybe Rakesh, you could give us a little bit of insight of like what Jonathan says, but what the relevance is then for the Middle East market.
Yeah, thanks, James, and very good afternoon to one and all. I mean, the Middle East region is very special. Yeah, I mean, it must address food security challenges, and this is resulting from water scarcity, climate change, hot climate, and regional instability. Hence, food and beverage plays a very important role in the Middle East diversified industrial sector. The government of, you can see regional countries like the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia bringing initiatives such as the Smart Manufacturing Incentive Program in Abu Dhabi that incentivizes sectors such as food and bev to embrace Industry 4.0. So in short, yes, it does play a very important role in the food security aspect in the Middle East. Yeah.
Right. And then maybe while we're talking about the region, could you go into some of the challenges in some of the traditional maintenance approaches that you're seeing?
Yeah, traditional maintenance procedures, they can be less efficient, resulting in increased downtime, higher repair costs, greater reliance on manual processes. And in the long run, this is leading to compromised quality without any predictive insights. And if you look at the food and beverage factories in the Middle East, they suffer from one thing, is the heavy reliance on global OEMs. All of them are from Central Europe, East Asia, etc. So there's a lack of documentation of their plants. If you understand the dynamics of food and bev plants, they are built by multiple OEMs over a period of time. And this brings in a lot of complexity with SOPs in operation and maintenance. And not to mention this, the region is driven by expatriate population. So there's higher employee attrition rate in the Middle East. And this can cripple productivity, erode institutional knowledge. It could drain resources. And this is prevalent due to the large landscape of end users. We're talking about 5,000 F&B end users in the market with a revenue of more than $1 million. Yeah? So these are regional specific challenges, James, yeah? And Jonathan. So I would really say that over a period of time, we need to look at regional specific challenges against global challenges. And probably technologies like PdM can actually fill that gap.
Okay. Well, on that one, the segue to Jonathan, how can like a PdM, predictive maintenance, enhance operational efficiencies and consistencies?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that centralized visibility of your production, of your machines, your operations is fantastic. And Rakesh, you said there, having a reliance on multiple OEMs, a facility is created with a full stack of OEMs trying to merge these things together. Quite often, they don't talk to each other. So they are siloed systems that you have to somehow configure and make work together in a way, or you don't configure them and you don't have that centralized visibility. But when you do start to incorporate that one central point that can speak to all the OEMs, where you can have a visibility of all these operations, you are in control. You have the know-how now, this visibility to plan in your maintenance correctly, to plan in your production cycles, to have an understanding and better projections of when you're making, what you're making, how you're making it, and a reliability of these operations so that you know what you're making is of the highest quality. So really, it is about gaining an understanding from all areas using your OT information, your IT information, and also the human element to bring it all into one point so that you're in better control.
Okay, it makes sense. And then Rakesh, maybe if you just bring it down a level lower, how does this really tie in with the Siemens portfolio? How can it help with a customer's digitalization journey?
Yeah, it perfectly fits in there. In fact, Siemens being a leader in the industrial automation sector, we provide a complete sensor to cloud solution. And I'm talking about connectivity across levels. I'm talking about horizontal connectivity, vertical connectivity. And being a player in that industry, we provide that one-stop shop to provide an end-to-end turnkey solution for PdM offerings. Challenge to say that we're one of the very few vendors in the world that offer this entire ecosystem from sensor to cloud. And it plays a very important role in the bigger accelerator initiative of Siemens, bringing in an ecosystem of like-minded partners globally to actually collaborate and communicate between systems very efficiently.
And I'll just add on to that, Rakesh. Siemens also bring the specialists and the expertise in all of those layers and in the industries. It's not just about the technology that Siemens provides, but it is the human elements as well, backing the technology.
Absolutely. I mean, we speak the OT language, and that differentiates from the IT landscape. And we provide the bridge between the OT and the IT world. And I think that's the perfect synergy for solutions like PdM.
Yeah, definitely. And Jonathan, I mean, you're working with customers kind of all around the world. Do you have maybe any examples that you can bring, especially from the F&B market?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a number of different types of F&B customers that we're working with globally. I think probably one of the most interesting ones that are on my plate at the moment, that we have a customer that deal with pet nutrition, essentially pet care, and they've gone for a global deployment. So we're looking at many, many factories around the world. They have identified that in various areas, they have different requirements. So in North America, for example, they have a specific requirement for handholding, very much a managed service. So that is full investigations, sensor selections, installations, integrations with their existing systems. That is training for personnel. That is even the managed service of looking at the results, interpreting them, and presenting that to the maintenance teams with recommendations. In other regions, if we look at Asia, they are looking for not necessarily a sensor-led deployment, but looking to really utilize their existing OT data and their existing investments. And using or letting the technology and our generative AI capabilities be that knowledge and recommendation basis for them. So that is a very interesting way to see how we have to approach the initial setup with them differently in different regions. However, the underlying technology is the same. The results, the logic, the machine learning factor of it is exactly the same. It's just how we would implement that. But there are huge variants in the type of machines we're looking at for this customer. Some are really focusing on support assets, fans, compressors, your utilities. Others are heavily focused on their main production assets, your extruders, chocolate conchas, and so on. Those type of machines. So very varying approaches to implementation. Mm-hmm. However, when we look at the value of this, it really is around maintenance efficiency. So reducing your reactive, your unplanned events, making sure they have better visibility of their planned maintenance approaches, and really moving them into a more efficient way. If we look at some of the other successes from some of our other food and beverage customers, there's a dairy in Europe that we went and investigated. I was there on site personally. And what we found is that in their existing infrastructure, they had very little control. Their systems were extremely siloed. They weren't sure whether or not we could get access to the data which was there. So we had to plan for a hardware-led deployment. Anyway, long story short is we came in, we made the recommendations, we helped to make sure that it was installed correctly, that various sensors were put on the right components in the right way, and data was coming through. And they got a return of investment for their entire investment, including hardware, with one save. One notification on a very critical piece of equipment meant that they had a return of investment immediately. So a very short space of time, but it is about targeting the value in an environment. And we have a very structured process, which I believe we'll get into a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about, again, we've talked about the efficiencies and so forth, but the other side of the coin, which a lot of our customers are asking about, is around quality control, and for example, compliance, these types of legal issues. I mean, where can predictive maintenance come in there to support?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with a better or a more reliable plant or a more reliable line even, you're going to have better product quality. So if you know that your components are running in a perfect condition or in a very good condition, that you aren't having tolerance drifts, that components are running the way that they should, you're going to have better quality. So some examples of this is we have been monitoring for one of our customers exit gauge. So product goes in through rollers to get a desired width of product coming out before it goes into the cutting, then packaging process. And by monitoring the exit gauge, a quality parameter, we've been able to see where some of these rollers start to become deformed, or the tolerance of the rollers starts to move away. So it gives us an indication of mechanical degradation. However, by spotting that early, we can then make sure that they aren't doing a run. There is a fire alarm test this morning.
Well, at least we know it's live, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. So by monitoring this quality parameter, we can make sure that we give them early indication that there is something wrong from a mechanical degradation perspective, but also that they haven't spent 2 days or 2 weeks even producing and packaging and then starting to distribute products which have got a bad quality behind them. Also, if you look at various things, now looking at mechanical parameters, such as if you look at a sealer bar is essentially an element. If that sealer bar is not running correctly or is not operating correctly, let's say it doesn't have a uniform heating profile across the bar. When that goes to seal your package, that could then leave spaces open on one of the sides. So that has a huge product quality and then can product quality impact, which probably won't get picked up or may not get picked up immediately. And therefore you have recalls because packages aren't sealed, food products are now exposed to whatever elements they have been, and there is a problem with that. So again, just to recap that, by having better reliability, you make sure that your standards and processes are followed better and that you have less potential for issues later on.
It makes sense. I mean, okay, this is all good. I think there'll be some people in the audience who perhaps haven't deployed predictive maintenance yet. So for these people, what would you recommend? Like, what are the first steps and like the best practices to get started when it comes to your first introduction to predictive maintenance?
I always say that any one of our customers needs to start with the problem definition, defining what it is they're trying to solve. If they're just wanting to implement technology for the sake of it, that's probably not the right driver. But if you identify in your environment that you have maintenance inefficiencies, that your teams are overworked, that they are having to firefight the entire time, that the cost of downtime and this lack of reliability is huge, that you have potentials for increasing your OEE and your output, then that is a good place to say, yes, I want to start. So you have a problem definition. And then for us, our structured methodology, I say, is quite simple. It's quite simple for us, but we guide our customers through this. So for us, we have 5 phases in every single project. These are scope, design, deploy, operate, and refine. And within each of these phases, there are 4 steps. But again, as I said, we manage the process with our customers. So if I just describe them briefly, scope phase is really information gathering within the sales cycle. We make sure that there is the correct problem definition, that we are looking at solving problems and really giving or generating value in a customer's environment. Then we would assess the assets, where this value is going to come from, the data, infrastructure, who's going to be involved in the project, so that we get a project team together and they are aware of their inputs, their requirements, and we define the success criteria, all within the sales cycle. Then once the project starts, we go into the design phase, which is an in-depth look or getting into the nitty-gritty of the project. Operational interdependency between machines. What are the actual communication protocols between various infrastructure or architecture systems, and so on. Then deploying is about making the data move. So if there is need for additional hardware, that gets installed, that systems are integrated, as data is streaming into the application, assets are onboarded, users are onboarded, and then trained, which typically takes about 1 to 2 hours. It's it's an intuitive system and doesn't require that much training, thankfully. The operate phase runs through a best practice approach on using the application, monitoring notifications, adding in work events, doing daily, weekly, monthly reviews. And then in the refine phase, it's about making it as good as it can possibly be in that environment. So we assess the need for additional data, if necessary, or potentially higher processing of data. We look at who's using it and the adoption factor. It doesn't matter how good your system is, if it's not being used, it's not a good thing. So we look at who's using the application and making sure that we are getting the adoption from the users. We also look at the success that's been achieved. And we have a process of documenting the success, because what we find is in any project, you'll have your project team, and the project team may know exactly what's happening, but they need to be the internal success distribution channel. They need to make sure that they are distributing the wins internally so that they can get wider buy-in and then can look at scaling the project and having it successful throughout an entire plant. So by following that process, we cover from initial investigations all the way through to success, and then that feeds back into the scale. So we would do that for the rest of the plant or for a new plant. We start the process again until we're looking at a global deployment.
I mean, yeah, you've laid. I think you've summarized it very well there. You've laid it out. Seems very clear. But like Rakesh, for someone who's going to be doing this for the first time, it could probably be quite daunting or overwhelming. What kind of support is on offer to help the customer?
Oh yes, I mean, being in Siemens in the Middle East is pretty close to the customers, and in a solution like PdM, there's a lot of hand-holding that's needed during the initial phase, especially design deployment. And so Siemens, right from the beginning, right from the consultancy phase, the design and deployment phase, the life cycle support phase, plays a very important role in actually guiding the customer towards this PdM journey. Of course, not to mention, there are a lot of challenges that come up with solutions that are adopted on the cloud. I mean, for example, data governance and cybersecurity. So we do have a team of network specialists, cybersecurity specialists that actually also guide the customer towards his compliance requirements in terms of his network integrity requirements, because it plays a very important role in the success of such projects.
Yeah.
Just to add on to that, Rakesh, as you know, I've done quite a bit of training with the engineers in the Middle East from Siemens. We, in fact, have some engineers who are preparing for a site assessment, the in-depth investigations with a food and beverage customer, starting with a factory in Dubai. So there is local support and local expertise ready to guide you through the process and guide you through to success available now.
Correct. And we're doing this from some of our key regions and key countries in the region, such as UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt. So we're trying to really base our expertise across the regions to get them as close as possible to respective end users in the Middle East region.
Great. I mean, look, it's a very compelling argument. It seems that you've got the process there to help people on their first time, like installing or deploying predictive maintenance. But Rakesh, you're talking to customers. There must be like certain objections or obstacles, or perhaps some barriers that's stopping them from adopting it. Well, what are these like main challenges that you're seeing?
I think if you look at Middle East in specific, all the Middle Eastern countries, at least the major ones, adopt very stringent data privacy laws. Yeah, so it makes compliance more challenging. And not to mention, cloud adoption in the Middle East has been slower than the rest of the world. Yeah, I'm talking about the West. And but nevertheless, the situation is fast changing. Governments are ambitious. Their ambitions are to diversify and digitalize their manufacturing sector, the economies. Hence, there's a growing awareness of cloud benefits. Now, this has accelerated the introduction of policies for cybersecurity, for data governance, for data protection. There are very cloud-specific policies in the region, and regulations in the region. So this has helped regulate the entire sector. Not to mention the cost of cloud adoption. It wasn't the case in 2019 when we had the first data center in Bahrain. Things are much different today. Increasing number of international cloud service providers like AWS, Azure, are in the region, and this has brought the cost of cloud adoption much lower than what it was 5 years back. So it's made it more affordable, more easier for our customers to adopt for cloud adoption than it was 5 years back. And not to mention, I mean, we've overcome challenges in PDM adoption like limited local expertise, the infrastructure. So these teething challenges have been overcome. And I think it's all a matter of time, the training, solutions, cultural alignment. We can actually bring this together with customers. So it's much better than what we were in 2020 and see a huge exponential growth in the sector in the coming years.
Great. And Jonathan, like from obviously, we're talking about Senseye. So if we were going to talk to our customers, how would you say that what Senseye can offer is a level above what else is out there in the market?
I guess there's many factors, but I'm going to split them into two. One is Senseye, the technology, the actual application. And then the second factor is Siemens. What do we offer, which is different and above? So starting off with Senseye, the application, really it is an automated platform. So the learning process, the understanding, the recommendations are all automated. We have our Senseye Copilot, which is essentially a virtual reliability engineer, which large language models inside of our environment, we're continuing to feed that with additional information around condition monitoring, reliability, and maintenance practices. So it's much better than just your standard large language model. The customer can also then add in expert knowledge in the form of documentation. So user manuals, maintenance manuals, spare parts lists, which can all be interrogated and the information made available at any request in the application. Our application is not limited to only rotating equipment. We aren't specialists in one form of data management, like vibration analysis, for example. But really, the application for a single asset can take in current, torque, vibration, temperature, speed, flow, cycle time, and a full range of other information to make informed decisions around degradation and give you those recommendations. So really, world-class, world-leading predictive maintenance technology. Then from a Siemens perspective, well, as Rakesh said earlier, we can do the full stack. Our availability from sensors, hardware, infrastructure, expertise, specialists who can come in and guide you through means that we can do as little or as much as is necessary. So for customers who want to take full control of their journey, well, you are guided by the specialists. You're guided by us. For customers that don't have the time or maybe even don't have the skill sets on site, don't worry about it. We can come and fill those gaps 100%. So from start to finish, from top to bottom, we cover the entire picture. And as I said, it's not limited. It is very much open. So in my mind, those are the differentiators.
I'm convinced.
Yeah. Another one from a regional perspective is, we're a very multilingual region. Yeah. So you go to a typical F&B plant, you will have operators speaking different languages, different cultures, not to mention, and integrating Gen AI features like the Copilot in our PdM solution has made it much more easier. Yeah, the prompts they could speak in any language, they could be prompted in any language. So that has made a complete paradigm shift in terms of user experience on PdM platforms, especially in a region like the Middle East. Yeah.
And Rakesh, on that multilingual factor and the Copilot, I was speaking with a customer a few months ago, and their OEM manuals were all in Mandarin, Chinese, and no one on site could speak them, so no one knew what was inside of the manuals. Whereas you're having a technology, the Senseye Copilot, for example, it doesn't matter what language that manual is in, we can put it in, and then the user can interrogate that manual from any language. Whatever language you speak and whatever language the manual is in, well, we've converged them into, easy to use platform.
Sure.
Fantastic. Now, we are, I'm afraid, coming to the end of our time. So just before we close on the actual, on the presentation or the discussion, maybe Rakesh, you can just start. How do you foresee the future of predictive maintenance in the region?
I think predictive maintenance is playing and will play a very important role in asset management in food and beverage industries. I mean, it's worth mentioning again that food and beverage industry, the F&B manufacturing plays a very critical role in the Middle East due to the factors I've already mentioned in terms of food security, in terms of water scarcity. I think uptime and productivity of these plants, it ends up being one of the most critical infrastructure sectors in the UAE. So there's more and more pressure on F&B manufacturers to maintain uptime and at the same time, very strict quality and safety standards. So altogether, PDM will play a very integral role in this. And thanks to AI, I think adopting PDM is much easier today than it was in the past.
And Jonathan, anything from your point of view where you think the future of predictive maintenance lies?
If we look at the rate of change in technology these days, the rate of change just keeps on accelerating. So it's only going to get better. So there is definitely a future, and it's a very bright future. However, what we have available today is phenomenal. And, what I keep saying to our customers, why are you waiting? Why are we spending 6-8 months trying to convince you where for 6 or 8 months you could have been getting value? You could have been having better production. You could have been making these savings. You could have better maintenance practices and efficiency. So why are you discussing this for 6 or 8 months? Let's get it in and start driving value. So it's not about the future of predictive maintenance. It's about your future using predictive maintenance. Let's get that future happening now.
Sounds good. Well, unfortunately, we have come to the end in terms of the discussion, but we have had a few questions come through. So if you've got time, we'll just go through a couple of these questions. So the first one is around, how do we determine if our plant is ready to move from condition monitoring to predictive maintenance? How do you know when to make that shift?
Well, I would say get in touch. Let us help and guide you, because as I mentioned earlier, there is no barrier, at least not anymore, to when you can start predictive maintenance. If you don't have a suitable infrastructure, we can help you with that. If it's the skill sets on site or a requirement for learning, we can assist with that. Really, it is about, do you have the defined problem statement? What is it that you're trying to solve? And are you ready for a journey? Because it is a journey. It does take time and effort to implement, but the benefits are huge. So we can definitely guide you locally to predictive maintenance from whatever starting point you're at.
Okay. Rakesh, have you got anything to add from a local point of view of maybe some of the barriers when customers are asking about, we do our own monitoring, we don't need the predictive maintenance?
Yeah. To be frank, I just resonate what Jonathan said. And in fact, we've actually successfully started the journey with quite a few customers, and it's been so positive so far. And we can guide them through. We can bring in our expertise, our best practices in the industry, and help them reach their goals.
Right. Now, we've had two similar questions, so I'll just kind of combine them. But it is about is Senseye really for large-scale manufacturers, or can it be applied to much smaller entities as well, who might have more limited resources?
Yeah. There are a range of starting points. So, historically, our focus has been on much larger companies, facilities, where there is that option for scale. However, working with our regional colleagues, we have found multiple different options, packages, whether it's an initial deployment or a starter pack or whatever it may be, that can help smaller companies still get the benefit of predictive maintenance, even though they don't have massive facilities and thousands of employees. So yes, we do have options available, and we can work with you to structure that offering so that it's best suited for your environment.
Okay. And this question kind of, I suppose, you've already mentioned earlier, Jonathan, like one of your case examples about the ROI, that one of your customers did see almost like an immediate ROI. Is that common? Is that the usual timeline, or what is the usual timeline? Would you say? Would you recommend to a customer you're going to see your ROI within this type of time frame?
Yeah, that is how long is a piece of string question, right? You can never be certain. However, we target the value. So as part of our initial investigations, we're going to look for the areas that have the highest maintenance activity, the least amount of reliability, and that's where we will start our initial deployment. So the chances of seeing something interesting, the chances of getting that ROI are increased because we're targeting those areas that will bring that. So we try and set it up so that we are going to bring value in that ROI. How quickly, or what is a typical timeline? There have been many cases where that ROI has happened within weeks. From weeks from onboarding, from it being ready, you now have a full ROI. In other cases, it is months. It could take, anywhere between 6 to 8 months. It really does depend. If we're monitoring, let's say, 100 assets, what are the chances that one of them are going to degrade and fail? Could be high, could be low. We could choose the most unreliable thing and nothing happens for 6 months. It is really hard to say, but our process is to try and target those areas that are going to drive value. We have a way of projecting what the ROI would be within the first 12 months. So our aim is to make sure that we hit that ROI a few times over within the first 12 months. So that's how we go about it.
Okay, and if I'm just sticking with timeframes here as well, what is the time frame generally, would you say, for like onboarding and the implementation till you would say like your predictive maintenance is actually fully up and running?
Again, it really does depend on the readiness, the maturity of the environment when we get in there. Things like system integration does take time. Factors like, is the customer driving the activity or is Siemens driving the activity? Those do have different times attached to them. Typically, though, we would expect to have data onboarded within the first 3 months. So we want to get the implementation, integration sorted so that by the 3-month period, the application is ready to use. We have done it much sooner than that previously, where everything was in place, and we have had projects that were delayed because, let's say, there were factors like system integration, which was, harder to overcome than the customer thought. But your aim is 3 months. 3 months from the moment we start the project to having full use of the application.
Okay, that's good. And then we've got one question that's just coming through actually onto the chat is actually, do you have a model or maybe a model that can be used to show the benefits and something that you could probably share with the wider audience?
A model? I'm not too sure.
Maybe like a case study or something, maybe.
Well, we have defined benefits. Well, absolutely. We have in the application a way of recording the benefits. So this is recording of maintenance activities, notification activities, specific KPIs, downtime avoided, spare parts saved, labor saved, that we can start to record the benefits in the application. We have series of templates and calculations that we can do to project what the benefit will be or your return of investment will be. I'm not too sure. That's the word model which is throwing me out there.
Yeah. Okay.
But if you would like to know more, please get in touch and we can.
I think that's exactly
discuss this and show you everything. One-on-one.
We can have a bit more detailed conversation. Right. Okay. I think those are most of the questions that have come through now. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. The only other question that's probably come through, which I can answer, is yes, after this session, the recording will be available. It will be sent to your email. So we can close on that now. Of course, as Jonathan said, please feel free to get in touch if you do have any specific questions. And then in the meantime, say thank you for our speakers, Jonathan to Rakesh. Thank you to our audience. Thank you for your questions. And we'll be in touch again for our next session on Senseye. Thank you very much.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels And find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.